Horizon should have never had the option of letting these farms go. Because effectively, if you stop and think about it, what they're saying, and I hope I don't get sued for this, but because it's true, is they're saying we want to be able to keep selling in your market area. We just don't want to be supplied in your market area. And we consumers need to say, hey, wait a second. Keep selling to us, but you've got to cycle your money. You've got to keep our farms alive.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project, a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture. You just heard from Gary Hirshberg, the former CEO of Stonyfield Yogurt, and more recently of the Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership, which was formed to offer support to the 135 organic farms that lost their contracts with both Horizon and Maple Hill Creamery over a year ago. Before we dive in, I just want to offer some current updates for context. Since this interview took place last winter, Organic Valley has offered contracts to the farms that decided to remain in business. We do know that Organic Valley has also announced a pay price freeze for the next 3 years. And as far as Gary's Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership that they discuss, the jury is still out on if this organization can increase markets and pay prices for dairy farmers, many of which are currently operating with pay prices below the cost of production. Let's listen to learn more about why and how this venture was set up.
Within organic, you've also had, I'll just call it different philosophies among the big producers. Now, with the project I'm about to tell you about, we have identified 35 brands across this region who we are celebrating and supporting and encouraging people. They range from tiny little one-farm operations like our friend Earl Ransom at Stratford Creamery, or Butterworks, or three-cow operations like the Maine Organic Milk Group over in Belfast area in Maine, all the way up to Organic Valley, which has, of course, hundreds. But the three big players in the market have been Stonyfield, in terms of supporting farmers, Organic Valley and Horizon. And even before Horizon's drastic move of a year of last fall, there were three different pay prices out there. Now, just to be clear, Stonyfield gets 80% of our milk from Organic Valley. So when I say three different approaches, we have 20% of direct supply from our own farm. So Horizon was paying the lowest price under pressure from their parent company. Organic Valley was paying the next highest price and considerably higher. And Stonyfield was with our direct farms actually paying a little bit more, but some of our pay was in the form of grants that we're going to for farm enhancements, putting in, aviary, bee operations and that kind of thing. Or methane digesters or whatever. But either way, these farmers, all of them, were still getting a pay price that was a livable price. And Washington State University produced a study over a year ago that showed that on average, all organic, not just dairy, are about between 22 and 35% more profitable than conventional farms. But on dairy, it's absolutely the case. And it's mostly the pay price. The profitability that is, the superior profitability for organic dairy comes from two factors primarily. One is higher pay price, like I mentioned, we're north of $30 per 100 pounds. Conventional right now is in the teens, always has been. But it's also that yields come up over time with the dairy farmers. If you're a conventional farmer and you're converting to organic, your first generation cows are not going to be as productive. Your second are going to be not as productive as your third. But by the time you get into the third and fourth generations, you've got animals who've now adjusted to the grass-fed diet, to the lack of feeds and so forth. And as I already mentioned, the animals are healthier. They have a better body mass index, and they're more productive. And so you're getting higher yields with lower inputs, just as you do with soil in terms of vegetable growing. So the situation has been that overall dairy consumption has depressed the growth of organic, because overall dairy consumption has gone down, but organic at least has been growing just slower than it needs to and slower than these farmers need it. Now along comes Horizon, who makes this decision.
Which is Horizon the biggest? Do they do the biggest volume of milk?
You know, I actually don't know that. Horizon, as you know, dropped 89 farms from sort of central New York across to Maine. I'm quite confident, I am certain actually, that Organic Valley supports more farms. What I don't know is total milk. But it's one of those two are the biggest. And of course, Maple Hill, we'll mention in a second, is in this. So just to make a complicated story somewhat succinct, along comes Horizon, who has been letting farmers go at a greater rate with, sometimes legitimate reasons if they don't fall short of standards. But a lot of Stonyfields and Organic Valley's farmers are former Horizon farmers because they've been dropped at one time or another. Some have gone out of business. But now, under the pressure of COVID and decreasing dairy, I want people to understand the big context, consumption, they made a decision that, as they claim, for transportation cost reasons, it was no longer affordable to bring milk from eastern New York, let alone Maine, across the region to Buffalo, where they produce most of their products. And so they say that reduction of transportation costs has led them to let these farmers go. Initially with 1 year's notice, and now more recently they've given an extension to the end of February 2023. They claim that it wasn't a move, as many have claimed, to go from smaller farms to bigger farms. I mentioned our herd average, which is around 66 cows per farm. That's generally Organic Valley's average in the region. My guess is Horizon must have been close to that, but they're certainly under 100 cows. Inevitably, when you go west, which is what they're doing, to Ohio, Western New York, you get to these larger farms. So the average herd size is going to grow. So while they may say that the reasoning wasn't to go with bigger farms, the inevitable truth is that they are going with bigger farms. That's just the physics. Northeast farms, New England farms tend to be smaller. I mean, I have farmers, Stonyfield has farmers who make money with 21 cows. When I say our 66 cow average, there's a lot under, there's a lot above. But certainly these are not 200, 300, 400 cow farms like conventional.
Gary, I noticed that 6 of the farms that Horizon is dropping are actually pretty close to their processing plant.
4 of them.
4 of them.
4 of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when we mapped for the first time this out, I found the same thing. So it does call into question the transportation claim, to be sure. The map, putting it more simply, at least for those 4, they're in a reasonable distance. What I will say about this, because of course we stopped my story before we got to the Danone part, and maybe I should go back a step for your listener, your viewers. So in the period that I stopped at in my history, which is around 21 to 25 million in sales in the early 90s, we grew the company by 2001 to about 100 million in sales. And at that point, I had 297 shareholders, individual shareholders. My mother-in-law being the biggest, not always a good idea. And I needed to provide an exit for these folks. I had no desire to get out myself. And I didn't want to sell the company. So I did a deal with Danone over a couple of years where I sold 75% of the company. I sold in multiple stages up to 75% of the company to them, holding 25%, ultimately 20%, but I still kept majority control of governance. And it's a long story, probably off the track for this, but it's a cool story and I'd love to tell it sometime. Actually, it's in the How I Built This podcast. But the idea was that, why did Danone do that? Buy a majority and not take control? Because they recognized, back to my point about gross margins, that Stonyfield's gross margins were 10 points lower than Danone's. It's one of the largest dairies in the world. But our net margins were as good as or better than theirs. And the reason was we weren't spending that money on advertising. So we had proven that financial model that I shared with you earlier in this discussion. So they wanted to learn. They wanted to let me be free. So from 2001, when I sold and got an exit for my 297 shareholders, to 2011, we grew the company then. For the first time, I was free to not worry about all my shareholders, my mother-in-law and my mother. And we grew the company from 100 million up to almost 360 million in sales at that point. At that point, I stepped down as CEO, and my arrangement with Danone was that I would have that control as long as I was CEO. I stepped into the chair role. Now, I should also mention during that time, to give credit where it's due, Danone made me the global head of organics for them. And we launched some beautiful organic brands around the world. In fact, one of them, called Lait de Vache in France, is the fastest growing was at least a few years ago, the fastest growing brand that Danone had worldwide. It's a beautiful brand. Same thing, Stonyfield replica. It's doing great. But we launched brands in Ireland and Italy and Spain. Some worked, some didn't. And around, in my role as chairperson, so I stepped back from controlling Stonyfield, but I continued to be chair. Emmanuel Faber, the former CEO of Danone, and I came up with the idea of them acquiring White Wave Foods, of which Horizon is one of the largest brands. And the idea was that I was going to become the chair or vice chair of this U.S. organic yogurt company. Unfortunately, the Securities and Exchange Commission had a different idea. This is a little bit of irony in this story. This was the same year they allowed Bayer to buy Monsanto. Mm-hmm. So you have the combination of two $70 billion chemical companies combining, no problem. This is the Trump SEC. But they wouldn't allow Stonyfield and Horizon to be combined because it was too much of a concentration of organic milk under one roof. It was all political. And I could go into that story too. It was a nightmare. But in the end, we had to divest. Danone had to divest, and they spun Stonyfield off. And I wanted to put in a bid to buy Stonyfield. I wasn't allowed to due to SEC stuff. So in the end, a company called Lactalis, which is a private company owned by two brothers and a sister, bought Stonyfield. So this brings me up to the present to say, at that point, I parted with Danone, and of course, Danone went on with Horizon. So bringing us to the present, I do have a lot of insights here. I knew how they thought. I knew that there was constant pressure on Stonyfield, which I was able to keep at arm's length because I was in total control, to reduce my milk costs. As I've said multiple times in this interview, the mission, Samuel's and my mission from day one was, and all the organic, my wonderful organic colleagues out there, has been to pay the farmers a proper price. There was always pressure because as a global dairy, they knew how to make it cheap. But I was always able to resist it. But still, I know that there was a voice inside Danone that was always unhappy about the fact that I was paying over $30 a hundredweight when they were, that was their jobs, to improve the profitability of the mothership. So bringing us to this is my way of saying to you that I have my own views, which I'm going to keep private, about what really was going on within Horizon. But regardless of those views, the fact is that this trend, this pressure on farms, and declining fortunes and inability to get as many farms to convert is not a new story. But with the sudden termination of 89 farms, we now had a bona fide crisis on our hands. And as you know, only a month or two later, Maple Hill announced an additional 46 farms that they were dropping for different reasons.
Could you tell people who Maple Hill
Yeah,
is
sorry.
as a
Maple
company.
Hill is a grass-fed organic dairy. It was founded by a former Organic Valley grower, actually, named Tim Joseph, wonderful guy, with an idea of doing all grass-fed organic. And Tim had proven that this worked on his own farm, and he built a very nice brand. But it's very expensive milk, and so as expensive as organic is versus conventional, grass-fed is even more so. And it's really hard to make money. And so then what happened was they were challenged financially, and a group of venture capitalists came in, and in order to get an ROI, they made some decisions that had to do with the balance sheet to drop those 46 farms. Either way, if you were a farmer sitting at your kitchen table in August or October of 2021, it was, most likely the worst day of your entire life. And let's not forget, a lot of these farms have been farming for generations, not just for their own lives. This was the day when they were given, effectively a firing notice. And the problem is that in this environment that I've already described of decreased dairy consumption, the options for these farmers are really limited. The only real solution for them to get contracts is either Organic Valley, Stonyfield, or somebody else launching their own products. But the problem is actually worse than I've described it, because in addition to dropping the farms, Horizon, as I mentioned already, is replacing that milk with milk from other farms. So it's not like there's suddenly a market gap, right? 89 farm market gap. There's no gap at all. They're just bringing other milk into the market. I have many of these farmers are friends, and I can tell you that, I can tell you right now that some of them that was it. That they sold their cows and they're out. Some went to early retirement. And we all need to understand, not the Real Organic Project, but consumers need to understand that, and remember that these farmers are reaping enormous ecosystem services. They're giving. So when an organic farm goes under, it's worse than a farm going under. It's a farm that has over years, at least 3 years, as you know, to get certified, been slowly changing the entire paradigm, cleaning up their entire aquifer, et cetera, et cetera. When they go to forest or whatever they go to, let alone a development, that's a real loss, especially to my little Lila, my grandchild, and future generations. So right away, you got one big macro problem, which is these farms, we can't afford to lose them. We've got to go in the direction of more of them, not less of them. Obviously, I should have said number one is the tragedy of these farm families, right? Like that I take for granted. Number two is losing these ecosystem services. Number three, just at an macroeconomic level, if these now 135 farms, when you add the two together, go under, it's in the order of $87 million of lost farm income into rural Northeast, right? We know, studies, American Farmland Trust has shown that 98% of organic farms purchases are local. So that money, they've shown that organic farm income recycles 1.9 times in the local community. So the economic impact of that scale of loss, again, almost $90 million, is catastrophic for a lot of these. You live in areas like this, I do too. And, this is not like chump change in rural Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont and New York. So I felt we needed to do something. We needed a new solution. And to make, again, a long story very short, it's clear to me, and I don't think this is debatable, that the only real solution for these farms is we need increased demand. We need the market to grow, whether through innovation, new products that come to market, new store shelves. We need conversion of cafeterias, University of Vermont and Maine and New Hampshire and SUNY Buffalo and the SUNYs, all their cafeterias, business and industry cafeterias, restaurants. We need to prioritize these farms. And I want to say, as I quickly go into explaining this partnership, which I can do succinctly here, that our mission is not just to save the 135 farms, this Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership. It's to recognize that this year it's 135 farms, but we've got to change the entire market conditions so that none of these farmers are ever in jeopardy again. Horizon should have never had the option of letting these farms go. Because effectively, if you stop and think about it, what they're saying, and I hope I don't get sued for this, but because it's true, is they're saying we want to be able to keep selling in your market area. We just don't want to be supplied in your market area. And we consumers need to say, hey, wait a second. Keep selling to us, but you've got to cycle your money. You've got to keep our farms alive. And so I recognize that we need increased consumption.
I'm sorry, Gary, but when you talk about what a company like Horizon should do, does this reflect on Danone North America being a B Corp? In other words, you expect them to play by somewhat different rules from, Monsanto? Because they are a B Corp?
Yeah, and B Corp has reached out. I know this has been raised. B Corp has reached out to me. I've had conversations, and I think those are good questions. Yeah, I do. I think they're, I'm not here to criticize Horizon. I'm here to save these farms, okay? That may sound disingenuous, but I don't see, they've made their decision, whatever their reasons, and I have my own feelings about them. But what we really need to do now, we've really got less than a year for the Maple Hill farms, and we've got just over a year and so I think it's for the Horizon farms. So I think it's really critical that we focus on them. But since you're asking, I'll say, yeah, I think there's some important questions for B Corp to ask. I believe there were other options available to Horizon. I think they could have, the regional task force that was created at Tom Vilsack's request, came up with recommendations that were very relevant to Horizon. Most recently, Horizon announced their support of some of those recommendations, investments in local infrastructure. They could have done local processing. Here in the Northeast, we don't produce organic dried milk powder. That's an innovation. That could save a lot of these farms. They could embrace and invest in that. There could be, we don't do UHT milk, ultra high, temperature. We don't do long shelf life. So there's a lot of innovation opportunities. There's no bulk yogurt, bag in the box yogurt or fluid. Albert Strauss out in California has brilliantly converted the Novato school system by producing bag in the box milk. What that means is when you sell milk in little cartons, there's a lot of wastage, right? Kids don't finish their carton, or a lot of them go out of code. With bag in the box, it's only what goes into the glass is used. And so just avoidance of waste allowed them to offset the premium from organic to conventional.
So going organic was no more expensive.
Well, according to Albert, they paid for it with reduced waste.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's why Albert's on the advisory board for this new partnership, because I want to tap that knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think there were a lot of choices that could have been made. I think if you follow B Corp principles to a T, yes, there should be questions asked. I don't think this can be dismissed as just a supply problem. These are lives. These are people. And when you subscribe to B Corp, and I was a part of Danone when it became a B Corp, then you are saying that you are supporting a notion of all stakeholders deserving to be cared for. And in this case, obviously, 89 farms are not being cared for. Now, Danone is working to try to provide, help, but these farmers don't want business planning, right? They want contracts. So, if I may, then
yes.
Just to summarize, so the Northeast Organic Family. So I spent the fall gathering together all of the smart people in the region, from the state commissioners of agriculture, Vermont and Maine and Mass and others, to Congress people, in one case, governor, and then all the activist groups, NOFA, MOFCA, NADPA. I pulled in processors, I pulled in farmers, and I said, look, what about we try something that's never been tried before, which is a total ecosystem commitment to building demand, to building market. And my board, which reflects all the stakeholders, convened our first board meeting last week. And this Wednesday, which for purposes of this video is January 12th, we will announce an unprecedented collaborative, which I hope by the time this video runs, we will have been successful, but it's possible it will fail, but it's worth trying, in which we're inviting all stakeholders to make a meaningful, tangible contribution to saving these farms. Not just the 135 farms, but to create an environment that lifts all boats, that allows us to maybe convert more of these desperate conventional farmers who want to convert. And the way it works is really simple. We are inviting people to become partners. We've created a logo for the Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership. Maybe we'll show it on your website when this runs. And what we're saying to consumers starting this Wednesday is sign a pledge that you will commit in 2022 to purchase 1/4 of your family's dairy from the brands who are committed to supporting these farmers. So that, like I mentioned, there's 35 different brands. 1/4. It's not an arbitrary number. It turns out that if 25% of Northeast New York City to Bangor, Maine consumers, 25% increased by 25% their organic consumption, all of these farmers would be saved. But we're not hitting consumers with the numbers. There's too much. So that's consumers. Sign this pledge. We will not share your name with anybody, but we will build the numbers. Then we're signing on partners, partner brands, the 35 brands. What's a partner brand? A partner brand does at least two of the following three things. One, they are pledging with affidavits that at least 50% of the milk in the products that they sell in this market are from this area. And or, number two, they are owned by family farmers in this area, because this is about supporting the ecosystem. And or, number three, they are publicly demonstrating a commitment to increasing their purchases of milk from organic family farms in the Northeast. If you commit to two of those three things, you're a partner brand. We've got 35 of them. I hope that number will grow, because that's how we're going to grow. Third partner is what I call retail partners. Retail partners are everyone from co-ops and natural food stores, the Whole Foods and so forth, up to the Hannafords and the Big Ys. But it's also restaurants. It's also food service, cafeterias, and others. And what we're asking to be a retail partner is that you will commit, first of all, to support some of the partner brands, carry them if you're not already. And secondly, that you'll commit to increase the purchases of Northeast Organic Family Farm milk in 2022 versus what you purchased in 2021. The good news is, because we know all the 35 brands, we're going to know if they did it or not. It doesn't, we know what they're buying. And we all know what we've all sold to them. So we are, by the time this runs, I hope we will have a long list, as it is right now, of partner retailers. We've talked to many. We have interest from the biggest of the big, Hannaford, to the tiniest, the little co-ops that I buy from, my Concord co-op. We have, but the idea, if you step back from it, is again, we're tying together the ecosystem. In addition, the Northeast Task Force that got their recommendations down to Secretary Vilsack and USDA, one of their major recommendations was to provide infrastructure money into the market for technology that we could do things like powdered milk and other things which should grow. And also for increased marketing and education monies to educate consumers about the ecosystem services of these, to make them more excited about supporting these farms. So in the end, this is not a heavy lift for anybody. We're saying to consumers, 1 in 4 of your items, just prioritize. We're saying to brands, if you want to commit to buying this milk, we're happy to promote you. And we're saying to retailers and food service, just commit to grow. The race is on, right? I mean, like I said, less than a year to save the Maple Hill, and a little over a year to save the Horizon farms. But I can tell you this is doable. Just private label milk in the market, organic milk, just powdered milk, just increasing, getting cafeterias to add organic as options next to conventional, getting students excited about supporting local. So it gets us full circle, Dave, all the way back to the beginning of this discussion by saying that, we are rebuilding a food system here. That's what organic is about. And this is just taking a crisis and expediting that. And, we'll see if it works, but I'm hopeful.
Okay, it's a great idea. It obviously takes a lot of juice to put it together. I know you've worked on this very hard. Let me ask, I've thought about it since I discussed it with you, and there's one thing that bothers me, and that is that how do you qualify to be named as one of those
Partner brands?
Partner brands, and I think that there's a commitment to at least 50% of the milk in the carton is from the region, from a family farm in the region.
It's 2 of the 3 commitments. That's one of them, and then being owned by farmers, the organic farmers in the region, is a second, and then
that would be, for example, Organic Valley.
Yeah. And the third is publicly, in other words, putting your reputation on the line that you are committing to grow your purchases from these farms.
Yeah.
So in the case of, it's the 50% that's by
that's what it's because if we're building, it's sort of like saying we have this new organic yogurt and it's 50% organic.
Yeah. No. Oh, no. It's not saying that. No, you can't.
Well, I understand it's not. That's my point. Yeah.
But I'll tell you the thinking on it. It's a little bit like, let's step away from this for just a second. And it's a little bit like the 1 in 4, 25% for the consumer. Like, why not 30%? Why not 1 in 3 or why not 1 in 2? I am emotionally committed to these 135 farms, and I want to reduce barriers as much as possible to increase consumption, because right now the only thing that really matters is that they're saved. Those who want to stay in are saved. And as I say, it won't even be 135 because some have already dropped. But this would be a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
So why 1 in 4? Because it's easier for consumers to do than 1 in 3. So to the partner brands point, why 50%? Well, simply put, when Organic Valley sources its fluid milk in this market, and their milk and their cream and their, well, I don't even know all their products, but that's probably 100% local. It's not probably, it is. But their cheese is not. Mm-hmm. And it was confused. I want to reduce the barrier. I mean, we need Organic Valley because we got to save these farms, right? But if I say to the consumer, only buy Organic Valley milk but not cheese, that's too confusing.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to allow that they would be considered a brand. And as it turns out, 50%, because 100% of their fluid, which is the big kahuna, is here, we're good. I mean, similarly, let me just be very transparent with your audience. At Stonyfield, we buy organic dried milk powder for some of our products. I already said we don't produce organic dried milk powder in this region. I hope we will soon. There's an entrepreneur near you who's trying to raise money right now to do that. But we're not 100% from the region either, even though we're, most.
Your fluid milk is, but not your dried milk?
No. Yeah. Oh, well, all the milk that goes into the yogurt, all the fluid milk, but I'm saying there's dried milk powder in some of those products because we don't use gelatins, right? We don't use stabilizers. That's what we use. And that, we don't produce organic dried milk powder here. So the goal was to set a meaningful barrier that would establish a real credible commitment to the farms, but not set up a hurdle that makes it impossible. Because honestly, with the time ticking, I mean, I'm not privy to this, so I'm not sharing confidential information here, but if I were to estimate, because I'm no longer a Stonyfield anything, you know, I'm a very, 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 very part-time employee with a very modest little, but I'm not in management. But I would guess right now, based on what I know, and I'm spending a lot of time on this, that Organic Valley and Stonyfield will probably end up being able to pick up about 60% of the 135 farms. If I were to, you know, make an educated guess, I just run the numbers. That's without this partnership. That's just through their own commitment to saving because they have the same commitment we do not to lose these farms. Like I said, organic dairy consumption is not growing fast, but it is growing. And if we need these farms 3 years from now and they're gone, we're screwed. But that still means 40% need a home. And for that reason, I need to, have credible minimum commitments, but not make them impossible for folks to do because the clock's ticking.
Yeah. Can I ask, do you think that Horizon is, how much of their milk, fluid milk, is from the region?
Well, as of next March, February, 0. That's what they're doing. I mean, they're not dropping some of the farms. They're dropping all the farms in the region. That's why I made the quip a few minutes ago that I think, organic consumers who, by definition, we're pretty committed to local, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to vote with our pocketbooks. Like I said, all the way back to Stonyfield's original, paradigm that, our dollars count. We vote when we shop. And, I think we need to say, look, fine, you're welcome to sell products in this market, but you got to circulate some of that money back here. You got to give too. And again, when you have the American Farmland Trust study that shows that 98% of organic farms supplies are derived locally, right? That means those monies are staying here. So when we're talking about losing $90 million or 87 million, I think consumers, this is all a lot for consumers to take. That's why I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can. But for people listening to this who are thinking about and working on these issues, I think we need to say that there are economic consequences to that organic is an economic proposition. It's changing the economic paradigm, as we've talked about, and there need to be economic consequences for not being a good corporate citizen. Yeah.
One thing that we've barely touched on was CAFO organic, which is huge. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge amount of milk coming into the organic market.
Yeah, the private label organic milk in this market.
Private label means store brand.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just for people who.
Yeah, there's as you are well aware, some of those large dairies would dispute the description as CAFOs. But you're also well aware of the exposures, the photography and.
I'm just using the USDA definition or the EPA definition.
No. I am too. I agree. It's a problem. Look. Let me say this on this topic. I've talked generally and said standards are in need of constant improvement. Well, there are two in particular. The origin of livestock rule, which you know all about, and I think your viewers probably, that you can, sort of, it's a workaround. That loophole's got to be closed, and it will be closed momentarily. Secretary Vilsack, I've personally logged a lot of time with Tom on this. As I told him when he got the appointment again, this is an opportunity for a do-over. There's a few things he didn't do. How many times in life do you get a do-over? This is one. This loophole should have been closed back then. They never got around to it. It can't wait. There was a lawsuit by the OTA, which Stonyfield supported. to force the USDA, and he has begged off. He's gotten a stay because he's committed to that in the first quarter of this year. And so by the time this runs, we should see that will happen. That's one. The confined feedlot thing has to go away, has to be eliminated.
The enforcement of the
pasture rule. Sorry, to put it more positively. And again, Tom's committed to that. And again, we got burnt the first time around. We, or the organic industry, we did not get done. By the way, GMO labeling didn't get well handled either in that last administration. And I don't want this audience, there's a bunch of things that need to be attended to here, but those two have got to happen. And, we have to hold their feet to the fire, and we got to get it done. And we do have the power of lawsuit here. We will litigate if they don't, but I'm quite confident that that will happen. But I also know we got to be vigilant to make it happen, right? For our purposes in this project, this Northeast Organic Family Partnership, I just want to underscore again, these are anti-competitive problems that have helped to create this situation for these farmers, but these are not problems in our region. These are under 100 cow farms, and a lot less than 100. And so my first order of business right now is that at this time next year, the 135 farms who want to stay in business will have contracts.
Yeah.
And it's not a Sophie's choice. You got to do both, but that comes first.
Yeah. Yep. You can't get them back once they're gone.
Well, and it would be a tragedy.
Yeah.
There's no. A lot of people don't like me using hyperbole because I'm dealing with all these state government people, but this would be an unspeakable tragedy, going in exactly the wrong direction of what we need to go through. And I'll just say too that I really do believe that organic should be mostly local. We alluded to the word scale before. I don't want to. I know you won't let me get away without saying something about it, and I'll just say, I understand why brands like my own, Stonyfield, expanded outside the region. You build a certain amount of infrastructure, you got to pay for it. If you don't have the volume locally, you got to keep expanding. But ultimately, in the same way that we need to be accountable to the externalities, we should really all be held accountable to a standard of being as local as we possibly can. That 7% transportation footprint is in kilocalories. It's a real number. It's big. So, I'm utterly focused on this region right now. We got to get the pasture rule. We got to get the origin of livestock fixed. There's a ton of other things that have to be done, as you and your colleagues know.
Huge one is the animal welfare about the poultry. Huge.
Yeah, the porches is a nightmare. And I've worked, as you know, really hard on that one. And we have a political problem there that has to be solved. Has to be solved, yeah. The so-called access to the outdoors with porches is, in my view, a gross and really, it's a gross abuse of, it's a gross loophole.
Yeah.
I promise you that as I have wandered through the halls of the Senate fighting for GMO labeling and the issues we're talking about now, I often am reminded of Lily Tomlin's quote. She says, no matter how cynical I get, it's hard to keep up, right? I do recognize the scale of the problem. It's ultimately it ties to campaign finance reform. Ultimately, we need, to not have sales. We need to have elections. But given the challenges to voting rights right now in this country, you got to take one thing at a time. And I feel pretty confident that there will be a compromise struck, which won't please everybody. on the porch on the poultry thing, which is that some grandfathering in of the existing abusers, but a stop to any new abusers. I think that's what you'll see. It's not ideal. It's bad, but it's better than allowing this to keep going rampantly.
Yeah. Okay, it's been a long conversation, which I appreciate, but Gary, are there any last things that you would like to say?
No, I think I appreciate that there's a lot that we've covered, and we probably haven't done justice to many of the topics as you and I would want to, and we will over bread, I know. I guess I want to just remind us all that eating really is a political act. Shopping is a political act. And while we're all working hard on each of our endeavors, let's remember that every day there are billions and billions of dollars going into supporting either the world we want or supporting the world we don't want. And we all have the power to talk to 3, 4, 5, 10, 50, 100 colleagues, families, PTO members, play groups, people who hang out at the park. A little nudge, like I said, if 25% of consumers in the Northeast changed 25% of their purchases, we would save all 135 of these farms. A little nudge goes a long way. These are solvable problems. I do believe the glass is half full, even though there's a lot to be fixed on the other side. And I just want to remind us that encouraging consumers or encouraging people to just buy a little bit, shop a little bit, has major, game-changing ripple effects. And that's what our partnership is about, and that's what whoever's viewing this needs to remember, that we have not only a responsibility, but we have an opportunity every day, every person we're talking to, just a little nudge goes a really long way.
Gary Hirshberg, thank you very much for talking today.
Thanks for coming over, Dave.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. We hope that you will subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a rating and review so that others can find us. A video version of this interview is found at realorganicproject.org/episode 92. Please join us next time when we'll be hearing from Zach Wolf, who is the farm manager at Al Gore's Real Organic Project certified Katy Fork Farms in Tennessee when I interviewed him. Zach has a curious mind and a great understanding for closed-loop, low-input, real organic farming. On this Giving Tuesday, make this the day that you support this podcast and our certified farms by becoming a recurring donor at realorganicproject.org and get the benefits of being a real friend, including our popular book club where you can ask many of our favorite authors your questions. Our next guest is Mark Schatzker, author of The Dorito Effect, on our book club, The Surprising New Truth About Food and Flavor. I hope to see you there.